and this is Life, an Inside Job, the podcast where we explore how to nourish our inner worlds and make them a great place to hang out, so our outer lives can be more fun, meaningful and satisfying too. I wanted to have a conversation with Angie Litvinoff because she is an inspired healer. She's a medicine woman, a creator of ceremonies and rites of passage, and a mentor who is utterly grounded. Very often people who reach her level of teaching and visibility are full of smoke and mirrors, of pretense and ego. But Angie finds a way of making identity and spirituality so simple and straightforward and doable. And this translates into her highly effective transformation program and her online calm pack from anxiety to creativity, which helps creatives find their true identity and voice. There is some explicit language in this podcast, so if that's not your thing, you may prefer to listen to a different episode. Angie and I talk about defining our own identity, about oneness, how to keep it real, about sustainability and accountability and racism, cultural appropriation, and of course, Angie's clever practice to identify your own route to finding your creative identity. Angie, I've just been looking at your website and really enjoying its vibrancy. But you know what caught my attention? It was when it said, "Let the bullshit fall away." And that really appealed to me because it sort of spoke about, well, I like letting bullshit out of my life, but it spoke about doing it without effort. And I love that.
Great, I'm glad you like that. I feel very strongly that there's a lot of mysticism around teachers and mentors and coaches, and people do love a leader and love to follow without kind of questioning anything, and it's not about that at all. It's the complete opposite. It's about really getting empowered to find one's own answers ultimately, and trust, and get the tools and have lovely people share what's worked for them, and borrow some and integrate some and make it your own. And also that it's got to be real, and it's got to be grounded, it's got to be solid, and not covered in some kind of mystical energy which is intimidating. It's got to be accessible.
Yeah.
So that's really important to me.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of dodgy. Unfortunately, there are a lot of dodgy teachers out there that use this identity of kind of basically it's hierarchical and patriarchal about knowing more than.
Yeah.
And we're talking about identity today, and I think that the first thing that is coming up for us here is this difference between a real life, grounded, gritty kind of identity that's truthful, and letting go of the kind of smoke and mirrors, and that can be conscious or unconscious, I think.
Yeah, there's a real difference to me that always comes up with this work of what we think we want and what we actually need, and that they're quite often two entirely different things, because a wanting can be a real temporary state. I want an ice cream, or I want a pair of shoes, but what I need might be a walk, or I might need all three. It's just an entirely different state of mind, and that as you get nourished, you get nourished by the things you actually need.
Mm.
And that's really important to gravitate towards,
Mm.
in order to be more fulfilled. And that it is about being authentic actually
Mm.
within that, and what that looks like, especially with social media being so, is so influential in our lives now, in many people's lives across the globe, that one's perception of what really exists is not necessarily
Mm.
representative of truth.
Mm.
So it's about knowing how you can begin to feel the difference. You can sense, you can navigate yourself with something, maybe it's not quite right, or maybe it doesn't feel quite right, and then just being able to, you don't know really, and you can't describe it, you can't explain it, but that's okay. You just have this gut feeling,
Mm.
and that is good enough.
Mm. And how do you identify? How does identity sort of weave its way into this knowing?
How we Our place in the world, our place in our lives, in our community environment, in our circumstances,
Mm.
is very much about a role that we slot into at some point through necessity, through daily life. And that if we don't assign ourselves that role, somebody else is going to make assumptions about who we are anyway. So we kind of sometimes, if we're not sure about ourselves, we kind of get labeled just anyway. Yeah, it kind of happens quite quickly. And so there's that sense of, right, okay, well, I have a spot here. It's like a spotlight, and it's mine.
Mm.
And so what am I going to do with that, actually? What am I going to do with that? How can I bathe in it so that I can reach a level of understanding on my precious small amount of time I've got here, however many years I'm on this planet, to really engage with life and connect on a meaningful level.
Mm.
And through that comes a sense of, well, what makes your heart sing? How can one connect in a creative sense? And people experience that entirely differently, everyone. Yeah. But what really satisfies your heart and your soul, so that one can feel a sense of oneness, actually, that transcends all the bullshit and transcends any need to be somehow to be approved of, or to be to be given brownie points along the way, or to follow a doctrine, or to fall into line with an ideology or anything like that. It's about being pure and honest with ourselves, and it's incredibly uncomplicated, actually, because what you're doing is you are following something that is a sensory thing, and that it doesn't have to. It's like when you immerse yourself. You might love swimming, right? And while you're swimming, it's about the water, it's about your skin, it's about the movement of your muscles, it's about your breath, it's about the oneness. Yeah. And that's enough. I mean, that's everything.
Mm.
It's not about thousands of other things that are really unrelated, that are kind of pulling you and distracting you from that. And you can apply that to many things. And so as you immerse yourself with what really makes sense to you, you find that perhaps those things are actually either come effortlessly, or they're really bloody well worth fighting for, and they're really worth persevering with. Because even if they don't,
I'd love to hear your story about your adventure through finding these places of oneness, because you have so many you have such a broad life experience,
Yeah.
and you have such a big you have a big toolkit. You have a lot of
Yeah,
skills.
yeah.
So I'd really love to hear about
Okay.
how
All
you can
right. Okay. Well, kind of trying to sort of condense it a bit. Yeah, it's. I began life when I was still in the womb. I was in Chile, and I'm from Chile, and 3 months before I was born, we had a military dictatorship, so everything changed completely. There was a military coup, and the socialist president was killed. So after a very short dream of socialism in Chile, there came this very frightening reality where people lived in fear for 17 years. And during that time, we left, but we experienced, my mother was a single parent after a while, and she was a teenage mum as well. My parents were teenagers, and then my parents separated after a while, and so my mother was a single parent. So we experienced, in effect, a lot of loss. We lost a lot of things along the way, and there was, poverty was widespread. And difficult times, curfews, and people being murdered and going missing. So there was a sense of people not being able to express themselves openly, and people were persecuted, and family members had to go into hiding and escape, and many lives were lost. And during that experience, there was a huge amount of personal loss to my family and to my mother and myself. And then when I was 7, we came to England, and with little more than a suitcase each, and we didn't speak the language, and we kind of landed here and had pretty much nothing for several years to get by on. And it's that sense of being resourceful, and change, and constant change, where there was a sense of having to adapt, and also being on high alert during this time. We experienced many things. I lived in a squat when I was 8. So we experienced, homelessness. We, experienced, living on nothing really for a long time. But also that what's important to remember is that we survived. So we survived. Not only that, there were strengths that were carried through all that time, and that amongst that is about connecting to a sense of something bigger than the situation, whatever situation you find yourself in. And so for me, it became a journey of actually addressing trauma. And so by the time I was 18, I'd realized that I had to do some inner work as a matter of urgency, because I was very depressed and sort of almost at a dangerous level. And so began this quest, and shamanism came into my life, almost like it just literally jumped in front of me, and things just literally fell on my lap. People, situations, and it felt like home. It just made.
Can you say what shamanism is and how that showed up for you?
Yeah, sure. So it's an earth-based consciousness, earth-based, connecting to the earth and to the cosmos, connecting to a sense that everything is interrelated. It's a metaphysical connection that we have, and within shamanism there is a sense of spirit, and there is a sense of being in this reality, and in this dimension, and in this skin. So you're able to go into different realms of, it would be described, you know, consciousness, realms of consciousness, but I think that that kind of limits it a lot. But for want of just being able to describe it, you know, in a very sort of concise way, and that this relationship enables us to merge with a greater sense of awareness that we are but a tiny aspect of something far greater. So other people, animals, plants, planets, and that there is energy everywhere. Everything is alive essentially, and everything speaks. So the connecting to the earth in this way, and connecting to the sky, and being able to merge with nature and the harmony and oneness that that provides for us, is a way of understanding life, which enables us to step away from this arrogant sense that we're somehow better than everything else on the planet. In fact, we are like everything else on the planet. We're not in charge here.
Like a radical change of identity from being, you know, the self that is wounded by the outside to part of the whole.
And you look for support within that. So the sense of, right, okay, well, what is life? How does life prop itself up during the seasons? How does, you know, how does the lunar cycle offer wisdom and support? You know, how, you know, even the level of gratitude that we can show to, you know, the warmth of the sun and being fed by the land, and everything is, you know, we can't take it for granted. But we've moved so far away from all of that, that coming back to it was something which really helped to anchor my identity, and also that in terms of self-expression, it allowed some voice to come through. My parents were activists and very involved in the Green movement. My mum and my stepdad here in the UK, and I grew up with a real sense of urgency about the planet. So that had also enabled me to grow in my education and awareness. I grew up in Notting Hill, when it was like a scruffy, creative, you know, very lovely, contradicting type of place. And that, growing up and living in London really supported my sense of really connecting with being an ethnic minority woman, being a woman of colour, and allowing me to feel at home amongst many other people of ethnic minority. So it became a universal identity for me, rather than connecting to being an immigrant, or being Chilean, or being a feminist, or by themselves. It was a sense of, well, actually, my identity is many things, and it's actually up to me to decide how and on what terms I define who I am. And I feel that for everyone. When you've had everything taken, what you've got is the opportunity to invite back the elements that are most supportive and that empower you the most. You can look at it in many ways. You could look at it in the opposite way. You could sort of invite back all the things that make you feel like shit. But actually, this is about, you know, connecting to a life that you want to live, as opposed to a life you want to get away from.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that sense of, right, okay, let's invite in the vibrancy. Let's focus on, right, okay, what can raise my vibration here? What can support me? What can nourish me? What can nourish me and help me to understand and to grow, and also to help address things that are uncomfortable and difficult at the same time.
So the shamanism and the connection to the earth really brought healing to you when you were very down. And
yeah, it was a grounding, literally, feeling like, having a real physical connection. And you can get that from when you dig your toes into the earth. If you go outside and you take your shoes off, that sense of like connecting to every blade of grass is alive underfoot. And not only that, beneath that, there are so many organisms, like just having a party, right, under the soil. And that sense of, right, you know what, I'm here and I'm amongst all of this. And they're putting up with me, actually, a lot of the time, because I'm not supporting them. So let me feel like we can be together and begin to listen to each other more, begin to listen, to each other, to other humans, and also begin to listen to what the earth is telling us, what the earth is teaching us, but also how we can be keepers. We can be earth keepers and support the planet better and be accountable. And the accountability is a big thing with anything we do in life.
Yeah, would you like to say a bit more about that? Because we were, just before we started recording, you were talking about your accountability in terms of your course that you're running.
Yeah, so we were talking about the 12-week transformation program that I run for people birthing their truth and vision and identity. In a wider context, accountability is really taking responsibility for when we initiate something and need to see it through to the end. So being able to be responsible and see that others matter. Others definitely matter. And I think that I was thinking about this actually before this podcast, and I was thinking about accountability this morning earlier, and about what is it that makes people be so thoughtless in life? We all go through that. I hold my hand up too, and it's like, well, what is it that why is it I didn't question for years that actually, cotton buds were made of plastic and ended up in landfill? Questions we never ask ourselves. And it's that sense of, why is it that I didn't question that until it was pointed out to me, or whatever. And it's that sense of, well, because I feel that we assume someone else is looking after all that, and we can just get on with it.
Oh God! Oh yeah? God! Yes. And patriarch.
Yeah, and so which I think invites this kind of very parasitic presence in the world. And so it's time to take back the control and say, you know what, I don't want your stupid cotton buds. Thank you. You can go and you can keep them, or just stop making them. And that sense of, right, okay, so if I do something, there's an impact somewhere. If I buy a t-shirt that's been made by a child in India, that has an impact. That has an impact, and I'm continuing the vicious cycle. Okay, so it's that sense of, right, okay, so let's question everything. Actually, let's question, who are we supporting here? Who are we really helping out? Is it each other? Is it the planet? Does it make me happy? Does it make you happy? And who is who's at the receiving end of this? Let's explore, research. So whenever we do anything, we could make ourselves a promise of, sort of self-development is such an enormous thing. And during this, during COVID and pandemic times, lots of people are doing great self-improvement stuff. But it's also about that sense of, okay, there are many aspects to this. And one of them is, and I am completely, I adore a process. I mean, I'm completely, I'm the process. I could just name myself the process queen or the process goddess. So like, as a self, little self promotion. However, so coming from somebody who adores processes, and my work is completely about rituals and rites of passage and transformation program, full of them. However, at the same time, accountability is there every single week with me, because we can do a process and it could become like getting up in the mornings and doing a mantra that loses its meaning. We can do it and we think, well, we've done that now, it's done, we're doing our bit. But actually what you're doing is you're kind of skimming the superficial layer and you're ticking a box and thinking that's enough. And if it doesn't have the right intention.
Angie, should we just let the bullshit fall away and lay into the self-development industry here?
Okay.
Because I have a real thing about this, where workshops are offered and you get really high, you have this wonderful breakthrough and la li la li la, and without accountability we crash. And then we go off and look for another high.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like selling cotton buds on one level.
Yeah.
Because people, myself included, but you become addicted to the high. You become addicted to this, this expanded sense. For me, it's a sense of expanded consciousness always, where I can feel all of myself, and as you were saying, feel into the alive blades of grass. And most of my life that's not necessarily accessible to me, so I go off to, I don't know, learn a new breathing technique, or I don't know, have my womb cleanse, whatever. And I get that thing, but then where is the fucking responsibility? Where is my what was it, accountability to myself and to the earth,
and also that
pisses me off.
This, and again, within that, the paradigm, the dominant paradigm is the sense of, it's never enough. You could, I think I was, because sustainable fashion is really, I'm really interested in it. And I was reading something about, like, there are actually well over 7 seasons in the fashion industry. I think there might be more a year. So actually there are 4 seasons in real life, but actually there are some woven in between, so that they pressurize people into thinking, that they've got to buy stuff, shit they don't need, really. And the minimalist movement is hugely inspiring to me as well. And I love reading about that. And that really, I just love it. It really motivates and inspires me. That sense of that high that you're talking about is because it's just never enough. It's never enough to go on one life-changing holiday where you climb the highest mountain in the world and leave it at that. It's never enough. Suddenly, then it'll be like, oh, right, what we'll do next year? I'm not speaking from experience here, but this is the vibe. Where in a culture where you can put everything on a credit card, and that it's never enough. And what happens is that the type of high that that it's about becomes more and more sensational. So it becomes also I find it quite crude and quite it has to be very exaggerated, like the feeling. So for example, it's a bit like if you're on which, I mean, I do love coffee, but if you're on, say, like 20 cups of coffee a day, and then you go on this big detox and you're not having any coffee, any sugar, any wheat, or anything fun. Which I also do. I go on these big detoxes as well, especially through since being on perimenopausal, I found that it's kind of nice to kind of have those moments when I don't have lots of junk in my body, and it's really benefiting me. So so you see, if you go through, like take out all those offending things, And then you have something like a herb, like a bit of, you bite into a bit of rosemary herb or something, right? And the feeling in your taste buds and the sensations on your tongue and the emotional response, as well as all the other sensory processes that are happening, are greatly amplified. And that is a moment of shamanic immersion where you're connecting to the oneness of the medicine. And you may even get messages from the plant kingdom about how to support yourself best if you allow yourself that space. And you're not going to get that if you're like covered in sugar, coffee, you know, the next high, the next hit, the next thing on the list, you know. So it's like that. And so it's the subtleties of, and the value of maybe being able to have that one nourishment and be able to feast on the memory of that and see what else you can get from that, and the lessons that it gave, and the memories that it created, and make it last a bit longer. Because what I find is that people, the minute they've done a process, you know, somewhere, people who come to me, I observe this a lot, which is why I encourage people not to do anything else while they're with me for 12 weeks, because I just find that it's an excuse to get distracted as well, and it's a bit of sabotage too. That that it's like, all right, I've done that now. I can go on to the next one, because it's all fast. It's never about slowing down. It's always like next one, the next one, the next hit, the next you know, the next high. And then we never really truly connect with the truth, which is something that only we can provide ourselves.
So my beef with the personal development industry, you're saying, is a sort of more global search for a high. Do you think that is cultural, or do you think that is human nature?
You know, I think about this a lot, because I do criticize the you know, the Western world a lot, constantly, in fact, in terms of I try and learn from. I think that everyone is. We all have it in us to kind of want. You know, want is an aspect of who we are, but it's also about what role balance provides in our lives. So the life of somebody in a very remote part of the world is always going to be different from somebody who's got bombarded with technology, you know, 15 hours a day or whatever, you know, in the Western world. And that whether, if you put those two people in the same situation, they would have the same response, I don't know. But I think they probably would be tempted by the same things. You know, I mean, you know, a chocolate cake's a chocolate cake, isn't it? You know?
But I think we can absolutely, as you're saying, make choices that will allow for a more unified experience. And simple, you know, it's, as you said at the beginning, it's not complicated. We can also remember the way the rosemary looked and the sensation and the way it felt and whatever came to us. I mean, rosemary is for remembrance, you know, it's good for the blood flow and the brain and all that. So, you know, it's quite a good choice.
And also that we might, what's really nice about whatever we do, as a, you know, whatever we do, so it might be that one day you do that and then you enjoyed it so much, you actually want more of that. So we actually, we want whatever we give ourselves, we want more of that. So if we're really spiraling into fear base and mass hysteria, we're gonna kind of hang on to that, and we're going to invite more of that because we engage with it. We just engage with it. We're giving it space. If you are stepping into and spiraling upwards in a place where you're actually doing some conscious things, very simple, because I think practices have to be in order for people to explore them and for them to be accessible, that you will also have enjoyed that so much like that you will, or it's not even so much about enjoyment, it's about the body and the mind asking for more of the same. So you would have got something out of that which stayed in the memory, and you will want more of the same there. So speaking as someone who's gone through periods of dangerous levels of depression as a much younger woman, and also having really dealt, and working with the shadow, and working with quite a lot of darkness, and having had a very long career as a holistic therapist for 20 years before I became a mentor, that if we give ourselves more of something that actually is nourishing, we're going to want that again. And it doesn't have to be this kind of something that is going to make us really high, and something that is going to be about sensational, really, really kind of exaggerated. It may be something that just feels right, and is very, very gentle, and it will be very, very, you'll engage with it. It will be very sensory. It will be very, you'll participate with it, and also you'll be the creator or the creatrix of it. You will be the creatrix of it. You will, if you're, you go back to where the rosemary was, and you start playing, with the earth and squishing it in your hands, and then you might think, oh, maybe I'll plant something. I'll see. I've never done it before, but I'll just see what happens. And so that's quite gratifying. And so the small things become quite mind-blowing when you start to engage with them, and that, the want of things is about checking in about how much balance is there, and what the consequences are. That sense of like, I've got to go outside of my I've got to go outside of my culture. It's not the same as going out of your comfort zone. You can go out of your comfort zone here every day, but that sense of like, I've got to go to someone else's culture, and then come back and then not give anything. Not give anything truly, all right, you might pay for it, but, not really give anything back to the planet, or to their community, or to their, their survival. So we're doing a lot of that. And that accountability is part of that. It's part of like, well, actually, we need to look out for each other. And if we're going to go somewhere and take, it's it's got to be about, well, are we, is it just the same as anything else that we do, where we're just taking the resources and the wealth out of the planet, and it's another version of that, taking the beliefs and the beautiful practices and getting them completely out of context, and bringing them to a place where it's like, well, did it make you a better person? Did it help you to become empowered? Did you help somebody? Were you able to go out there into the world and assimilate and integrate those things? And will you be able to feast on it for the rest of your life? Will you take the lessons forever? And will you be able to really, really connect with your soul in that way? So I have very mixed feelings about why people do certain things with self-development, and that there's also a lot of missing the point along the way. And that the growth, if we stay still for long enough, is a very subtle energy, where the potential is a subtle energy where we can grow and be out of our comfort zone, which I think is a very healthy thing, but do it in a way which, is going to be something that we can be accountable with and for.
And I wanted to ask you about this. You're a woman of colour in a very white industry.
Yeah.
And you live in a very white, straight town. And I wondered how you cope with that, how you cope with the shit that is inevitably getting projected on, particularly as you work with earth-based practices and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I guess I'd like to say that I admire your grounding.
Thank you.
Because that must take a bit of...
Yeah. Well, as I shared earlier, I grew up in Notting Hill and Ladbroke Grove, and being a Latina woman in Ladbroke Grove isn't unusual, but as a sort of now living outside London, and in fact before that we lived on the coast in East Sussex. It was an entirely different experience. It was a first for me. And I have a dual heritage family. My husband is Black. We have Afro Latino children. It's an interesting journey, and one which I have to say, being really honest, can be very difficult if you if we focus exclusively on all the things that tend to go really against us. Amongst them is an acceptance of racism, which we experience all the time. It's just so much part of the culture that people don't realize it's there, and once they have it pointed out to them, some of them get extremely defensive about it. So it's a constant process of two things go on: empathy and education for a life of harmony. Having both of those things within our culture, more accessible, is important. And then on the day-to-day, you can imagine, sort of with all of those elements, we really stand out. We really stand out in our town, and that it has taken me years. It's taken me years to feel a sense of being okay. However, I have got to the point where I am okay, and it's partly due to the fact that in a couple of years I'm going to be 50, and I really don't care anymore in the way that I used to about people who what people think of me, who don't really know about anything I do. I'm a homeopath, and I use homeopathy as a psycho-spiritual tool these days. I don't have a clinic anymore. I don't see patients in that way anymore, and that in itself is very controversial in this day and age. But I feel that really giving time and space to situations in which people are unsupportive or refuse to want to have a level of education to reach a further greater understanding about something they haven't got a clue about. I haven't got time for that. I'm in my midlife. I've got, if I'm lucky, I've got another sort of 35 years ahead, and I'm going to make the best of this and the most of it. And I'm going to live a life with empathy and education, and come from that space where it's all about empowerment. And that the daily challenges that present themselves are very, very real. But you become a little more selective, in fact, a lot more selective about the situations that you gravitate towards. So being around people that are like-minded or open-minded, and have a level of understanding where you don't have to explain yourself from scratch, where you have a connection, so that you can feel that sense of community and oneness, and build on that. Empathy and education always have to be there, but also to share, and then whoever's open to it is welcome.
And as a mother, you have to guide your young people through this racist environment too, and help them to find their own way with that.
Yeah, and that is a learning, because I experienced racism as a child, and certainly as a child immigrant living out of a suitcase. you know, you experience a lot of things. And my husband, who wasn't an immigrant, you know, he grew up, you know, with his family in London, but also nevertheless experienced, he has Barbadian heritage, experienced racism, of course. And that feels, as adults, we have a very different viewpoint. But the very first time it happens to your child, you know, is a shock. And the very first time it happened to us, we didn't really know what to do. We didn't really know. We couldn't like respond immediately, like that second. It was impossible to have the right words to come out and be supportive and empowering and educational and all of those things all at once. It was just impossible. We were just in a state of shock. It was like, did that really happen? Did that really happen? Whereas now, because my oldest is now a teenager, it's a very different situation. You know, I am aware and I am on alert, and I take up opportunities to point out when things are wrong, and you know, build on the experience that we have had, as well as bring empowerment and pride and of our identities into our home. And at the same time, it's about building a sense of identity which is your own, because again, for my children, they are neither me nor my husband. They are them, you know, and they didn't grow up in Notting Hill or Chile or Barbados. You know, they grew up, you know, here. So their identity is unique to them, and they're still figuring that out. And that as long as they have strength and they can draw from really good mentors and influences that help to inspire them, they will ultimately decide what makes most sense to them, but with all the right support around them.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel so moved.
Oh, well, thank you for asking.
By the presence you bring to it, you know?
Sorry?
By the presence that you bring to a very challenging situation.
Thank you. Well, I can only answer that now that my son is older. That, you know, I did struggle with a sense of, oh my God, you know, I'm not teaching them Spanish, you know, what about their roots? And, you know, what about this and what about that? And actually, well, it's my roots. But they will gravitate towards what makes sense to them, because actually identity as a young person now is entirely different from where we were growing up. There's all sorts of other variables going on here, where actually, in fact, I just feel like you have more choices now. One is able to define more clearly, ultimately, and as well as all sorts of influences that come in, which are kind of, you know, not so positive. But there's a sense that actually they've got this weird thing going on where I just think, my God, they're just so saturated and influenced and dominated by the powers that be. And at the same time, you know, you speak to either of my kids and they speak sense. And it's like, all right, okay, well, maybe you know your own thought processes. It's just a total revelation to me every day. It's like, you know,
sounds like
humbling.
You've done a bloody brilliant job with them.
Oh, thank you.
Good parenting there.
Thank you.
So, coming towards the end now, can you give us your best top tip for a vibrant internal life, please?
Yeah, I would like to present a little something to do to get to that special tip, which is very individual. So really exploring, in terms of exploring identity for creativity and being your own creator or creatrix, and for a fulfilling life, is looking, I would start here. So I would look at your life and I would divide it into 7-year segments, 7, 14, 21, 28, etc. And within those little pockets of time, describe to yourself how you feel about yourself at each stage, and focus on what you created in your life which nourished you and what you were left wanting more of. Okay, so it can, and that creativity could be, it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. You know, I remember like knitting with my granny. At the age of 5, that would be my thing that I would put there. It's different for everyone, right? And so, but what you'll be left with is a significant list in each of those little chapters. And so then you look back and see how you feel about that self-expression that you're left wanting to birth. And it's that sensation that you carry forward, because it's a sense that something is important there, the essence of that, and it's special to you.
Mm.
And you may not be at the stage where you give yourself permission to truly own it, but you can begin, and you can start by allowing it into your life and get comfortable with it being there, and to help you anchor who you're becoming. So invite in what you're left wanting more of, and begin to bring that into your life, and then see how you feel.
I like that. Because the top tip thing is a bit sneaky, because of course top tips are reductive and ridiculous. But I can't a meanness in me that wants to kind of trap my interviewees into committing to something, which is a bit mean now I come to think about it. But that is
well, no, thank you, because I mean I do a variation of this as one of the processes in my program, but it's just, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And what better place than to look at what has made sense to you? And it may not be that I want to go back, take up knitting, but it, in my own life when I went, but that excitement that I got from that, discovering something creative in me, which helped to define me at the time. I was very headstrong. And my granny ended up, like, she hid the knitting needles in the wool at one point because she just got so fed up when, it was really difficult to teach a 5-year-old. So it's, it's that, but it's that sense of, that kind of craft work, sacred craft work I do now. It was sowing the seeds of making. Making is a very spiritual thing. It can be a very spiritual thing. And that when you're left wanting more of something, and you might not want more of that, but that feeling that you get when you think, you know what, I really, really helped to make me feel good about who I am, and I'm exploring who I'm becoming. So let me get used to that essence of that.
Beautiful. Where do we find you, Angie, on social media? Or
yeah, so if you're into Instagram, I'm Angie the Medicine Woman, or my website is angielitvinoff.com. So either of those, or the Insta will click you through to the website as well.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, and your personal journey, and your courage and presence, actually. Really lovely. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor and a delight. I just love talking with you. So thank you. Thank you so much.
My choice quote was, when you've had everything taken, Angie says, what you've got is the opportunity to invite back the elements that are most supportive and what empowers you the most, that you can create the life you want to live. Wow, that was so juicy, and it was such a privilege to have the benefit of Angie's wisdom. Her website is at Angie, Angie Litvinoff, that's LITVINOFF.com. And her Instagram is Angie_the_medicine_woman. And if you fancy joining the conversation about identity and creativity, or any of the topics we covered, you can find me over at Instagram at Kate_Codrington. I'd love to know your take on this stuff. Don't forget to subscribe so you can catch up with the other episodes. I've got some really cool stuff coming up for you about creativity, about writing, letting go, and activism in menopause, all helping you make your inner life a fantastic place to hang out.